Hello there, and welcome to my basic guide to competitive Pokemon battling. I see many posts on the internet from people who have no idea how competitive battling works, and are usually just redirected to practicing on Showdown. Here, I hope to explain everything a person would need to know to become a competent, competitive Pokemon battler. Here I have a table of contents for all the things I'm going to cover in this video. Mainly stuff I think is important, such as the terminology, generation history, abilities, IV breeding, EV training, entry hazards, etc. So have a look through the list here and see what applies to you most. So first, let's briefly go over the history of Pokemon. The first games were Red, Green, Blue and Yellow. These games are now collectively known as the first generation, or first gen, of games. First coming out in 1996 with 151 Pokemon available. Then in the year 2000, Generation 2 came in the form of Gold and Silver, and later Crystal, adding a further 99 Pokemon. Since then we've had quite a few generations and games, as seen listed here, which brings us to the present with Generation 7's Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, and a total of 807 Pokemon. There are a few terms that come with competitive Pokemon battling. Here I have listed the more common ones and their meanings. OHKO / one-hit KO, or one-hit knockout, followed by tank, a wall, a sweeper, setting up or setup, box legendary, and mythical. People who battle often will likely become accustomed to hearing these terms. Next, there is stab. Basically, if a Pokemon uses a move that is the same type as itself, it'll get a same type attack bonus, as in the move will do extra damage compared to a move that is not the same type as the Pokemon. Here is an example. Scizor uses the bug move Bug Bite, taking just over a third of Donphan's HP. Then it uses the dark move Thief, taking just over a quarter of HP. So it is good to be aware of this difference in damage that stab can make. Now, one of the most important things about competitive Pokemon battling is what format. There are two main branches of competitive Pokemon battling. Smogon, a fan-implemented metagame based around single battles, and VGC, the format used at all official Pokemon tournaments. It is based around double battles. Choosing the Pokemon for the format you want to play is quite important. Some Pokemon work brilliantly in singles but badly in doubles, and vice versa. Also, some moves are only made to have a purpose in double battles, like Helping Hand. You're going to want to tailor your Pokemon to be used in singles or double battles, because they are both quite different. An important game mechanic to be aware of in Pokemon is the difference between attack and special attack. Some moves do damage based on the attack stat, while others do damage based on the special attack stat. An example being Fire Punch based on physical attack, while Flamethrower is based on special attack. Many Pokemon specialize in one of the offensive stats, so it's best to become familiar with your Pokemon's stats so you can choose the attacks that are best suited for it. The other category of moves, alongside the physical and special moves, is known as status moves. Status moves are often ignored by non-competitive players, since they do no direct damage. However, if used correctly, they can greatly turn the tide of a battle. Stat boosting moves, for example, can make some mundane Pokemon formidable sweepers, capable of one-hit KOing an entire team of 6, where if they had not set up a stat boost, such a thing would be impossible. Here is a quick glimpse of stat boosting power. Omastar is now able to 2-hit KO specially defensive Pokemon after boosting its special attack and speed. They are either unable to withstand a hit, or are unable to hit back with enough power to prevent such a sweep. Mercilessly, Lord Helix goes to work, able to take out my opponent's entire team. A rock type, ice type, with the move coverage that Omastar has as well, it is able to defeat this person's team entirely. Slime, Muck here was my biggest concern, because I know they are quite specially defensive, but after that stat boost, that is a clean 75% a 2-hit KO. And even though he was able to take my HP by about 50%, I outspeed and I'm able to finish him off without any real concern. In comes Jump Pluff, 4 times weak to ice, and very quickly goes down. The key to such a tactic is knowing the appropriate time to boost, like when you are fairly certain your opponent is going to switch out, or the opposing Pokemon poses no threat, or you have lowered your opponent's key offensive stats, perhaps by bringing in a Pokemon with Intimidate. Inflicting status conditions can also be greatly beneficial, since you can reduce opponents' attack, or speed, or you can stop them from being able to attack, or make it so that they will faint after a certain amount of turns. There are hundreds of other status moves that can be beneficial in certain situations, like Trick Room or Follow Me. It's best to watch battle videos or to read a move's descriptions to learn when is best to use them. Another important game mechanic to be aware of is abilities. All Pokemon have abilities. Some can greatly benefit a Pokemon, while others can hinder it severely. Some abilities, like Levitate, provide immunity from an attacking type. Others, like Tough Claws or Iron Fist, can boost the power of certain attacks. Sometimes the same species of Pokemon can have different abilities. It's always best to research your Pokemon's possible abilities and choose the one best for it. One of the most important aspects of competitive battling is becoming familiar with all 18 types of Pokemon. Here is a brilliant type chart made by someone on Reddit back in Generation 6, which is still applicable for Generation 7. I will provide a link to this image in the description of the video. Learning the type chart feels like an ever-ongoing process. There are many times in battle where I find myself struggling to remember something like if rock resists bug. But knowing as much as you can will certainly help, and checking out this poster definitely helps me. Now we can move on from the basics and talk about what makes a Pokemon good for competitive battling. These 4 points are the most important factors in determining how good a Pokemon will be. Typing, base stats, move pool, and ability. Being a grass bug type with 6 weaknesses, as opposed to an electric flying type with only 2, is going to put a Pokemon at a disadvantage. However, even if a Pokemon has bad typing, they may have other factors to make up for it. Next, there are base stats. Most Pokemon have a unique mix of base stats, some higher than others. Jolteon, for example, has an 130 base speed stat, while Slowbro has a base 30 speed stat. Slowbro won't be useful in situations where speed is key, but Slowbro's base defense is 110, while Jolteon's is 60, so Slowbro is more likely to survive a physical hit than Jolteon. Whether a Pokemon will be good for your competitive team depends on its stats and the role it plays, a speedy attacker or a defensive wall. I'll leave a link to a brilliant comic by Reddit user Bomberdude Comics that explains Pokemon stats in the video's description. Next, move pool can play an important part of how well a Pokemon is able to perform. Take Flareon for example. Highest attack stat of all evolutions, but until Generation 6, its strongest physical fire move was Fire Fang, which only had base 65 power. This, along with no other good coverage moves like Earthquake or any high power moves of any other type, left Flareon almost never used by people, compared to its differently evolved siblings. However, in Generation 6, they gave it the move Flare Blitz, which has a base power of 120. In an all-evolution online tournament, Flareon, thanks to its new move, came out in top position. While still not great in many regards, thanks to its addition to its move pool, Flareon has been able to shine. Finally, we have abilities. As mentioned on the ability slide, some abilities can make a Pokemon powerful, like Blaziken's Speed Boost, while others can even hinder a Pokemon's ability to battle, like Slacking's Truant ability. Some abilities can provide a Pokemon with a niche that needs filling, giving it a critical role on a team, like Espeon's hidden ability, Magic Coat. This allows it to reflect hazards, like Stealth Rock or Toxic, back at the Pokemon who's using them, and is thus a hazard deterrent. Now we move on to what some may describe as the most confusing aspect of competitive Pokemon training, the 3 main factors that influence stats: natures, individual values, or IVs, which can also be known as individual strengths, and effort values, known as EVs. Natures. All Pokemon have natures, bold, timid, careful, brave, etc. There are 25 different natures. Each of the natures increases one stat and decreases another by 10%. Some increase and decrease the same stat, thus cancelling out the effect. I'll leave a link to a chart in the description showing all the Pokemon natures and their effects on the stats. Individual values, also known as IVs or individual strengths. Each of the stats of a newly hatched or captured Pokemon is based on a scale from 0 to 31. A Pokemon with a 0 IV in a stat will have the lowest potential stat number possible for its species, while a Pokemon with 31 IV will have the potential to have the highest possible stat number for its species and level. Seeing your Pokemon's IVs used to be impossible in-game, but in Generation 6 they added a character who would judge how good your Pokemon's stats /IVs were and would tell you. In the current Generation 7 they improved upon this by adding a function to the PC where you can see a graph telling you how good your Pokemon's stats /IVs are. Here we have two level 1 Abra. Their stats are fairly similar, with only 1 or 2 point difference, but now let's use the judge function and see how these Abra compare. We see this Abra here has best in its special attack, special defense, speed and defense, meaning that its IV in those stats is 31, the best it can be, whereas on its HP and attack it's only pretty good, meaning that it's between 16 and 25. So it could have, say, a 17 in its attack and maybe a 20 in its HP, for IV that is. But when we compare the other Abra here, we see it only has decent in all of its stats, except for pretty good and no good. Decent being anywhere between 1 and 15, and no good meaning 0, the lowest possible IV. But as we can see from the stats, IVs don't really matter so much with low-level Pokemon. Now let's compare that to some high-level Pokemon. Here is a Metagross I caught in Ultra Moon and used in my playthrough. Well, caught it as a Beldum of course, but leveled it all the way up to 100, and here we can see the stats. It has a speed boosting nature with Hasty, and 212 speed. Let's compare it to the Metagross that I bred in Alpha Sapphire. Here we see quite a difference, 50 points difference in its speed stat, not to mention this one's attack, defense, special defense and HP are higher. The other Metagross does have a higher special attack stat, but special attack is kind of irrelevant on a Metagross. Now let's compare their IVs. We see this one has pretty good in most of its IVs, again meaning between 16 and 25, and decent in the others, meaning between 15 and 1. When we compare this to my other Metagross, we see this Metagross that I bred has best in all of its stats except for special attack, which is fine since this Metagross will never use special attacks anyway. So, given the difference in points here, we can see the great difference that a proper IV, bred and EV trained Pokemon can have. EVs are hidden points gained from battling other Pokemon. These points can add up to increase the stats of a Pokemon. A Pokemon can only gain a maximum of 510 points, and only 252 EVs per stat. They have been around since Generation 3, which involved battling one species of Pokemon over and over again to gain the maximum amount of EVs. In Generation 7, when on a Pokemon's summary screen, if you press the Y button, it will show you a graph of your Pokemon's EVs. Here you can see the difference between two Blaziken. One that was used for the story of Pokemon Emerald and thus battled lots of random Pokemon, acquiring many random EVs, and the other bred in Pokemon Y, with EVs trained into specific stats. The sparkling effect means that the stat is maxed out for the EV points. And when we look at the numbers, we see quite a difference. 372 in attack compared to the other one, 305. A very big difference, along with speed there, 200, and then 259. The other one does have higher HP and defenses, but the most important stats for a Blaziken are probably its offensive and speed stats, because if you're able to hit harder and hit faster, you're more likely to win than a Pokemon who can not hit quite as hard. So, it is through a combination of the natures, the IVs and the EVs that a Pokemon can gain its highest possible stats, and therefore be ready to go online and fight against opponents with the best chance of winning. Here are the essentials you will need to make IV breeding a breeze. A 6 IV Ditto, or 5/6 IV males from all 13 egg groups. You can use 4 IV Dittos, or the best you can get, but it won't be as efficient. The item Destiny Knot for passing IVs, the item Everstone for passing a specific nature to the offspring. Also, some Pokemon can learn great moves, but only if one of their parents knows the move, so it's best to check a website like Cerebi.net to learn what egg moves your Pokemon can learn. I will provide a link to a picture telling you all the males you would need from egg groups to have a fully breeding bunch, but personally I recommend a 6 IV Ditto. As for how you EV train, in Generation 7 the most efficient way to do so is SOS battles. Using an adrenaline orb while in a Pokemon battle and lowering the health of a wild Pokemon will usually make it call for help. By defeating the called Pokemon, you can gain many EV points quickly, especially if you have the virus known as Pokerus and your Pokemon hold the appropriate power item. So maybe now you understand how to make a perfect Pokemon, but how should you train it? Well, that's up to you, but you should probably work with your Pokemon's strengths. Umbreon, for example, has quite low special attack, and speed, so offensively, even if you got the perfect IVs and trained it to the max, it wouldn't be hitting very hard. However, its HP, defense, and special defense are all quite high. This, along with HP recovery moves, suggests that investing into Umbreon's defensive stats would be far more beneficial than its offensive ones. As for how Umbreon would fight opponents with its very low offensive stats, well, there are workarounds for that. Toxic, for example. When using the move Toxic to make the opponent badly poisoned, HP damage will increase after each turn, and also the move Foul Play, which ignores whatever the user's attack stat is and uses the opponent's attack stat to do damage with. So if a powerful attacker like Metagross comes in, or if someone boosts their attack by Dragon Dance for example, Foul Play will do tons of damage. Also, you can check out websites like Smogon, who generally have good analyses for Pokemon which can help point you in the best training direction. For example, here is Conkeldurr. It shows you its stats and what moves would be good for it to learn and what nature would be best. It also suggests the EV spread and gives a nice description of why that is the case. Since Generation 2, Pokemon have been able to hold items. Some items can greatly help a Pokemon. As to what items are good to use, that'll often depend on the way you've trained a Pokemon. For example, a bulky Umbreon would appreciate an item that can restore HP, such as Leftovers, or it might appreciate an item that does damage when hit from physical attacks, like Rocky Helmet, which then dissuades physical attacks. There is plenty of room for experimentation with items. One thing to note, though, is that some items have no effect when held, such as a potion. A potion is an item that must be used on a Pokemon, not held by one. However, if an item can't be held, there is often an equivalent item that can be, such as berries. Berries restore HP or can cure status conditions along with various other effects. So read the items' descriptions, find out what they do, see what items are commonly suggested from people on Smogon or on YouTube. In many battles, I've come across people whose Pokemon aren't holding any items, because they couldn't think of what to give them. Almost any item is better than none. I suggest, when in doubt, use berries. In Generation 7, a new kind of item and game mechanic was introduced, Z-moves. While holding a specific item, a Pokemon is able to use a superpowered version of a move once per battle. Here's what it looks like in action. Kabutops is holding the item Rockinium Z, and it turns, in this case, the move Stone Edge into the Rock Z move, which is known as Continental Crush. Z moves can only be used once per battle, and they do very heavy damage. Their base power is often very high. As we can see here, against the Mega Manectric, it is able to take it out fairly easily. They can also alter the effects of status moves, giving the status move an added effect. Z moves are often best used with strong Pokemon or Pokemon who can boost their offensive stats to punch through an opponent's defensive Pokemon. Z moves are also able to hit an opponent through the move Protect. Protect normally blocks all damage from attacks, but using a Z move against a Pokemon that is protecting does 25% of the damage the Z move otherwise would have done. In Generation 6, the mechanic of Mega Evolution was introduced. What this meant was that certain Pokemon were able to evolve to a further stage temporarily during battle, sometimes changing their abilities, types, and always getting a boost to their base stat total. For example, here is a Charizard evolving into Mega Charizard X, where it becomes a Fire Dragon type and gains the ability Tough Claws. Once the battle ends, the Pokemon reverts to its normal form. There are only 46 Pokemon capable of Mega Evolution. I'll leave a link in the description that shows you which Pokemon these are, so watch out if you see a Pokemon on your opponent's team and that is able to Mega Evolve. In Generation 2, they introduced the concept of entry hazards. Certain moves throw hazards across the battlefield, so that whenever a Pokemon is switched in, they can take damage. Here I have detailed the 4 different kinds of entry hazards as of Generation 7. Stealth Rock and Spikes do actual damage, while Toxic Spikes inflicts poison, and Sticky Web lowers the speed of Pokemon that are switching in. Entry hazards are a lot more common and important in full single battles where switching is commonplace. Most single teams will have either a Pokemon with the move Rapid Spin or Defog to try and remove entry hazards. If you are able to feint your opponent's Rapid Spinner or Defogger, then your team will have the advantage. While a Pokemon's speed stat is usually what determines who goes first in a battle, there are certain moves which will go first, ignoring the speed stat. These are known as priority moves. The vast majority of moves have a priority ranking of 0, meaning when they attack is dependent on a Pokemon's speed. The move Quick Attack, however, will ignore a Pokemon's speed stat and go first, unless the opponent has also gone for a priority move like Quick Attack. In that case, whoever has the higher speed stat will out-prioritize the other. Conversely, there are moves with negative priority, meaning they will always go last, even if the Pokemon using the move is very fast. On this slide here, there is a list of all moves that are prioritized positively and negatively. It is also worth noting that in Psychic terrain, priority moves will fail to work, unless targeting a flying type or a levitating target. Weather has been in the Pokemon game since Generation 2. There are currently 4 different types of weather that can affect the battlefield. Some power up moves, others do passive damage each turn. There are many weather dependent abilities such as Sand Rush, Slush Rush, Chlorophyll and Swift Swim, which all boost speed in their respective weathers. And there are far too many other abilities affected by weather to list here. Many teams can be built around the use of a particular weather. Some Pokemon have an ability which summons weather to the battle when they are switched in, such as Ninetales with its Drought ability, summoning Sunlight, or Alolan Ninetales with its Snow Warning ability, summoning Hail. Terrains were introduced in Generation 6, where they were rarely used since their benefits were limited and only a few Pokemon had access to the moves which could create them. However, in Generation 7, the legendary Tapus of the Alola region each have an ability of setting up a terrain as they enter battle. Thus, terrains have become a much more popular aspect of gameplay. They often boost the power of the type they represent, as well as having another aspect such as preventing status or preventing positive priority moves. It is a good idea to become familiar with terrains. Next, I should mention some key differences between single and double battles. As far as moves go, there are quite a few moves that are useless in single battles, such as Wide Guard, Helping Hand or Ally Switch, either failing or having no effect at all. It is a good idea to read a move's description when you first encounter it. Also, many moves that work alright in singles become vastly better in doubles, such as Protect, where you could potentially do damage to your opponent, while they do no damage to you because they've targeted your Pokemon that's protected and your other Pokemon has attacked. Fake Out is also great because you can force one of your opponent's Pokemon to flinch, while your other Pokemon could do heavy damage to it or set up. Since in double battles, where 4 Pokemon are on the field at once, more happens per turn. This often makes double battling much quicker than singles, where switching is vital to stay alive and get into good position. This fast-paced double style generally and gratefully benefits the use of moves like Tailwind and Trick Room, or Reflect, or Rain Dance, since more can happen while these moves are in effect, essentially making them last longer. Another thing to note is hazard moves are rarely used in doubles, while in singles they are omnipresent. In VGC specifically, where only 4 Pokemon are used in double battle format, switching is quite limited and sometimes isn't necessary, so using a turn to set up an entry hazard is usually better spent boosting stats or inflicting actual damage. As a result, they are almost never seen in VGC. So, given all this information, can you win using your favourite Pokemon? Maybe. Teams need to be well balanced in order to survive in the competitive scene. What I often do is use 1 or 2 of my favourites on a team, and fill the rest of the team out with bulky Pokemon, or Pokemon who counter those to which my favourites are weak. As I mentioned on this slide here, if your favourite Pokemon is Charizard, best bring some Pokemon that resist Rock, and some with either Defog or Rapid Spin. In single battles, switching to take less damage from attacks is often important, so having bulky Pokemon who can take hits well is quite important. I find it much more satisfying winning with Pokemon I like, as opposed to those which are simply more powerful. Learning how to battle efficiently involves a lot of trial and error. The more you battle, the more you'll become accustomed to various species of Pokemon, how fast they are, and if you can survive a hit. In one of my earliest battles here, I learned that Raichu are very fast, and can learn Fake Out, which broke my focus sash and flinched me. And then, since he was faster, he was able to take out my poor Smeargle without it ever getting a move off. Ever since that battle, I learnt an important lesson: don't leave Smeargle in against Raichu. A new feature of Generation 7 is the QR rental teams. On the Pokemon Global Link website, you can scan the QR code of a team someone has uploaded, and it will allow you to battle online with that team. Online on the 3DS anyway. Many YouTubers and high-ranking VGC players upload their teams for people to try out. Another great resource for helping to practice battling is Pokemon Showdown, a battle simulation website where fans have created a hierarchy of Pokemon, split into tiers based on their usage on the website and occasionally their strength. On the site you can build teams quickly and test them out against other players quickly, compared to breeding a team in the actual game. One thing to note though, is that all battles are conducted on a ladder system, whereby you gain a score, or lose score depending on how you do. This encourages people to play to win. So, having slightly more relaxed battles with a variety of Pokemon can be difficult to come by, except for low-scored, inexperienced players. Here are links to some great resources for competitive battling. I will put these links in the video description along with the other links to various things I've mentioned in this video. Thank you for watching, and I hope my explanations can help you become a great Pokemon battler, whether you want to become a hardy VGC veteran, an adamant Smogonite, or a relaxed casual player. Please share this with anyone who you think it might benefit, and thanks again for watching.